I had just closed the door behind Ethan, watching his silhouette disappear into the quiet evening as he headed off on yet another business trip. The familiar sound of his suitcase wheels fading down the brick sidewalk was oddly comforting, like a ritual we both understood but never talked about. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, one hand resting on the doorframe, letting the stillness sink in before finally locking up. Our house sat on a quiet street in Charleston, just a few blocks from the water. The sea breeze often curled through the windows if you left them cracked, carrying with it the scent of salt and magnolia, wrapping around everything like memory. The city was peaceful this time of year, warm enough in the afternoons, but still cool in the evenings, the kind of weather that begged for soft blankets and sweet things. I stopped by the little corner market on the way home from work, picking up a box of dark chocolate truffles and a bottle of red wine. I wasn't planning anything special, just a quiet night in. I slipped out of my shoes by the door, turned on a lamp in the living room, and curled my feet beneath me on the couch. My favorite blanket, thick and fleecy, and a little too worn around the edges, was already waiting there. I pressed play on the latest episode of a comfort show I had seen a dozen times and let the glow of the television light the room in soft blues and yellows. Nights like this had become my small indulgence, when the house was mine alone, when silence wasn't lonely but gentle. Despite what it looked like from the outside, our marriage wasn't perfect. Ethan was a good man, loyal, responsible, and kind in all the right ways, but always busy. His job pulled him in 100 directions, and more often than not, I was left behind in the quiet. We rarely fought, and I never doubted his love. But I often wondered when our relationship had become more like a routine than a romance. I told myself it was normal. Life changes, love settles. And maybe, just maybe, I had always been someone who found more comfort in stillness than in sparks. I was born and raised here in Charleston, in a little clapboard house tucked behind jasmine-covered fences. My mom and my grandmother raised me. I never knew my father, and they never spoke about him. From what little I gathered over the years, he had been a fleeting summer romance, someone my mom met during a trip to the Outer Banks before returning home with me, growing quietly inside her. But I never resented his absence. In fact, my childhood felt full, filled with warm baking smells, sunlit porches, and the soft murmur of two women who handled every problem with a cup of tea and a long talk. Our home was always calm, never chaotic. No shouting, no slam doors. Just quiet understanding. I think that's where I learned to love peace more than passion. While other girls dreamed of wedding dresses and whirlwind romances, I was content with novels and long walks by the harbor. My mom used to say I had an old soul, that I was too wise for my age. Maybe she was right. I was always drawn to things that made me feel safe. Predictability, routine, knowing where everything belonged and why. That's probably why I said yes to Ethan. He wasn't flashy or dramatic, but he was steady, safe. And for someone like me, that was enough. Or at least it used to be. And out of nowhere, she'd say, "You shouldn't spend your best years alone, baby. Life passes faster than you think." I'd laugh it off, roll my eyes, but I knew what she meant. I was the living reminder of her summer fling turned single motherhood. And though she never once made me feel like a burden, I think some part of her still carried the weight of having raised a daughter without a partner to lean on. I loved my mom and my grandmother more than anything. They were strong, kind, and fiercely loyal to each other, but they were also quiet women. They didn't live boldly, didn't chase after adventure or heartbreak. They found contentment in safety, in routine, in clean countertops and soft slippers. And I think they hoped I would want more. Or at least something different. I didn't, though. At least not back then. In high school, I never dated. I wasn't shy, and I wasn't invisible. I had friends, good grades, even a few boys who hovered around, but nothing ever stuck. I wasn't interested in the drama of teenage romance, the breakups in the hallway, the whispered gossip at lunch. While my friends swooned over boys with guitars or Letterman jackets, I was more interested in computer science clubs and coding competitions. I liked logic, clarity, the satisfaction of things working the way they were supposed to. Love, from the outside, always looked messy and loud and unpredictable. That didn't appeal to me. When it came time to choose a major, I picked information technology almost without thinking. My mom had nudged me toward it. Good field, steady job, and lots of smart boys, she said with a wink, but I genuinely loved it. I liked building things from scratch, watching systems come together piece by piece. It made sense to me in a way people didn't. I started college not far from home, commuting from our old house in West Ashley to the small local campus in downtown Charleston. It was a manageable life, safe, familiar. Then my grandmother passed away. It happened in my sophomore year, suddenly and without warning. A stroke in the middle of the night, gone before the ambulance even arrived. I remember the way my mom crumpled when she got the call. It was the first time I had ever seen her really break. That woman had held our little world together with nothing but sheer willpower for years, and in that moment it all came crashing down. I moved through those weeks in a daze, attending classes out of habit, helping with funeral arrangements, pretending I was fine. But I wasn't. Not really. Her absence left a hole in our home that never fully closed. The house got quieter. My mom started spending more evenings watching TV alone, falling asleep in her recliner with the remote still in her hand. I threw myself deeper into school. I told myself I had no time for dating, that it wasn't the right moment, that I needed to focus. And part of that was true. But the deeper truth was, I didn't know how to want it. I didn't know how to crave closeness. It felt like a foreign language, one I had never learned. Still, my mom kept trying. "You're beautiful, Hannah," she'd say gently, brushing my hair back behind my ear. "Don't waste these years thinking it's too early or too complicated. Fall in love. Make mistakes. Don't wait until it's too late." But I wasn't like her, or my friends. I didn't daydream about weddings or baby names. I didn't believe love was the missing piece. I was content with solitude, with a life that made sense, where everything stayed where it belonged. Maybe I was just wired differently. It wasn't until I started my first job that I even considered the possibility that someone might see me as more than just a quiet, practical girl behind a desk. I remember the first day like it was yesterday, walking into the office of a mid-sized logistics firm nestled near the old Port District. The building had been renovated from an old cotton warehouse, exposed brick walls, big windows, with beams stained with time. It smelled like printer toner and freshly brewed coffee, and it buzzed with the energy of people who took their routine seriously. That's where I began to feel something shift. I didn't know it yet, but life was about to hand me my first real lesson in what love was. And what it wasn't. I met Jonathan Hayes on a Tuesday morning that didn't feel like it was meant to be special. I was walking down the hallway at work, carrying a stack of invoices I barely understood, when I nearly collided with him outside the conference room. I had looked up just in time to see a man in a navy blue suit stepping aside, smiling slightly as he held the door open for me. He wasn't what I expected. Everyone had been whispering about his visit all morning. Jonathan Hayes, regional director of one of our partner companies, someone people described with phrases like sharp mind, rising star, and definitely someone to watch. I had pictured someone older, maybe stiff or condescending. But the man standing in front of me was warm. Polished, yes, but approachable in a way that made me pause. He had these focused blue eyes that looked directly into mine. Not through me, not past me, but into me, like he actually noticed me in a way that most people didn't. "You must be new here," he said, his voice low, confident, like he was already in control of the conversation. "I don't think we've met." I would have remembered. I laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "Yeah, I've only been here a few weeks." He held out his hand. "Jonathan Hayes." "Hannah Walker." He repeated my name softly, like trying it on for size, and I swear my heart skipped a beat. That should have been it. A polite exchange, a professional smile, maybe a wave next time we passed in the hallway. But Jonathan didn't let it end there. He found reasons to speak to me every time he visited, asking questions about reports, complimenting the way I organize things, even once teasing me about the ridiculously perfect penmanship on a sticky note. It wasn't much, just small things, but I noticed. A week later, he called the office and asked to speak to me directly. "I hope this isn't too forward," he said, "but I'd like to take you to dinner, if you're free." I was stunned. No one had ever asked me out like that before. So direct, so certain, like he knew the answer would be yes. And somehow I said yes without even thinking. My cheeks were hot for hours afterward. He picked me up outside the office that Friday night, opening the car door for me like he'd stepped out of a movie. He smelled like expensive cologne and ambition. We drove to a rooftop restaurant I'd never heard of, with soft jazz playing in the background and string lights dangling overhead. The view of the city made me feel like I was somewhere else entirely, someplace glamorous, adult, not just the girl from the quiet house in West Ashley. Jonathan ordered for both of us, after asking just enough questions to make it feel like he was tailoring the experience to me. "You'll love the seared scallops," he said confidently. "They're the best in town. Trust me." And I did. I found myself leaning into his choices, letting him guide the evening, his stories, his pace, the wine. He talked about his work, his drive, the cities he'd visited. He made me feel interesting just by asking questions about my childhood, my dreams, my favorite books. When he looked at me, it was with intensity, like nothing else in the room mattered. That gaze made me feel beautiful in a way I hadn't before seen, admired, chosen. I floated through the night like I was in a different body. I wasn't just Hannah, the cautious daughter, or Hannah, the quiet office girl. I was someone exciting, desired. And when Jonathan leaned in at the end of the night and brushed a kiss against my cheek, his hand warm on my back, I felt something unlock inside me. I think part of me already knew he liked to be in control. But instead of questioning it, I let it comfort me. Letting him lead meant I didn't have to decide, didn't have to worry. He was older, more experienced, and the certainty in his voice made the world feel less overwhelming. And I wanted so badly to believe that this was it, that I had finally found the kind of love my mother always dreamed I would. The first time Jonathan told me not to wear something, it came out like a compliment. I had picked out a short floral dress for a Sunday brunch with some old college friends. Nothing outrageous, just light and summery, something I'd worn dozens of times before. But as I stepped out of the bedroom, he tilted his head slightly and said, "You know, you'd look even more stunning in that navy dress you wore to the fundraiser. More elegant, classy." His tone was smooth, almost thoughtful, like he was doing me a favor. I changed. It didn't feel like a big deal at the time. Just one outfit, just one suggestion. But after that, the suggestions kept coming. He'd raise an eyebrow at a shirt that showed too much shoulder, frown slightly at a pair of jeans with frayed hems. Eventually, I just stopped wearing anything he might not approve of. I started watching myself, not just how I dressed, but what I said, how I carried myself, how I laughed. I didn't notice the shift at first. It crept in like fog, soft and slow. We started spending more time together, our lives weaving into one long thread. Jonathan lived alone in a spacious condo overlooking the river, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. He began suggesting, then asking, then insisting that I stay over more often. "It's silly for you to keep commuting back to that little house," he'd say. "We barely see each other as it is." And I wanted to be near him. I really did. So eventually I packed a few bags and moved in. At first, I tried to carry my weight to make the place feel like home. I cooked. I cleaned. I reorganized the spice cabinet, even though I had no idea what half the jars were. I watched YouTube videos on how to fold fitted sheets, like a hotel maid. I burned dinner. Twice. Jonathan didn't yell. He just smiled tightly and ordered takeout. "You'll get better," he said, kissing my forehead. but there was something clipped in his tone that stayed with me all night. He started making comments about how his mother made the best chicken pot pie, about how his old girlfriend always kept fresh flowers on the table, about how important it was for a woman to create a peaceful home. None of it was cruel, exactly, just sharp enough to sting. He didn't like when I made plans without checking in. What if I'd arranged something for us, he'd say. Don't I matter in your schedule? He didn't like my friends either. Thought they were too loud, too immature, too reckless. Why hang out with people who don't inspire you? He asked one night. And maybe he was right. Maybe I was outgrowing them. I started canceling plans, making excuses. They stopped asking after a while. Jonathan talked about the future constantly, about marriage, about our wedding, about what colors we'd use for the reception, what kind of photographer he'd hire. He hadn't proposed, not yet, but he spoke like it was already decided, as if we were already halfway down the aisle and I just hadn't caught up yet. Some nights, I'd lie awake next to him, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I felt this strange hollowness in my chest. He did everything right, bought me gifts, took me to fancy dinners, remembered anniversaries I didn't even realize we had. He was everything my mom had always hoped I'd find. Ambitious, dependable, generous. But there was something else, too. A pressure, a tightness I couldn't name. I felt like I was constantly trying to be enough, pretty enough, poised enough, helpful enough. I had stopped asking myself what I wanted, stopped making choices that were just mine. Somewhere along the way, I had gone from feeling cherished to feeling shaped, molded. Still, I told myself this was what real love looked like. Commitment, sacrifice. Growing up meant letting go of some independence, right? I imagined my mom's voice, proud and hopeful, telling me I had finally found a good man, and I clung to that image like a lifeline, even as the current beneath it began to pull. It happened on a Friday night, just after I had turned down yet another invitation from my friends. They had planned a little get-together at a rooftop bar downtown. Just a few drinks, nothing wild, but I had declined without thinking. Jonathan didn't like bars. He didn't like my friends. And truthfully, they had stopped expecting me to say yes. I had become the one who always stayed home. I was curled up on the couch, flipping through channels without watching anything. When he came in with that peculiar energy he always had after closing a big deal, half buzzed from success, half distracted by his own thoughts. He sat beside me, took the remote from my hand, and turned off the TV without a word. Then he looked at me with that smile I used to find charming, but now read as rehearsed. "It's time," he said. "I've waited long enough." Before I could even ask what he meant, he pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a diamond ring, shining under the lamplight, beautiful in a cold, clinical way. He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't say he loved me. He just said, "I'm moving into a higher position next quarter. This makes sense now. We're ready. Say yes." I stared at him, frozen. I heard my own voice echoing back at me in my mind. Every excuse I had made, every justification I'd whispered late at night to explain away the pressure, the control, the weight of his presence. Suddenly it was all there, right in front of me. The times he had critiqued my cooking with a patient sigh, the way he frowned when I tried to wear something bright or short, the passive-aggressive comments about my friends, the silence that followed every tiny rebellion. And I thought, this is not love. This is management. This is control wrapped in silk and gold. Something inside me cracked, not violently, not loudly, but like a thread finally snapping after being pulled too tight for too long. I smiled softly and said the words that surprised even me. "No, I don't want to marry you." His face didn't change at first. He blinked, as if waiting for a punchline that never came. "You're shocked," he said. "It's okay. I should have prepped this better." "No," I repeated. "You don't understand. I'm not shocked. I'm done." I stood, grabbed my bag from the side table, and walked to the door like I was walking through water. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I didn't stop to argue. I didn't try to explain. Because deep down, I knew no explanation would change anything. He hadn't listened for months. Why would he start now? I didn't go back to the condo. I didn't go to our favorite restaurant or to a friend's couch. I went straight to my mother's house. She opened the door in her robe, surprised, concerned, but she didn't ask anything. She just hugged me, long and tight, like she knew. That night, for the first time in years, I slept deeply. No pressure, no expectations, just the soft hum of the old ceiling fan, the scent of my mother's lavender sheets, and the quiet beating of my own heart, steady, unburdened. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I met Ethan the night I snuck out of a company party I didn't even want to attend. It was one of those stiff, overlit events at a rented banquet hall with lukewarm food and forced laughter. People clinked glasses and made awkward small talk while a DJ tried and failed to get anyone to dance. I lasted an hour, maybe less. 2 girls from accounting, and I ducked out and wandered into a bar a few blocks away. A cozy little place with live music, exposed brick, and the kind of soft lighting that made everything feel a little warmer. A local band was playing something bluesy, and for the first time all evening I felt like I could breathe. That's when I saw him, Ethan Walker. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room or the best dressed. But something about the way he laughed, unrestrained, eyes crinkling at the corners, caught my attention. He was sitting with a few friends at the end of the bar, talking easily, like he belonged anywhere he went. When our eyes met, he smiled, not a smirk, not a performance, just this genuine, easy kind of smile that made me smile back without meaning to. I ended up alone at a table while the girls went out for a smoke, and that's when he walked over. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair. "Not at all," I said. We started talking about the band, then about music in general, then movies, and somehow in the span of 20 minutes, we had moved from favorite directors to childhood TV shows to our mutual love of old architecture. It was easy. There was no performance, no pretense, no calculated charm. Just 2 people having a conversation that felt like it could go on forever. We exchanged numbers before the night ended, and I remember walking home feeling lighter than I had in months. No pressure, no expectations. Just the memory of someone who listened without interrupting and looked at me like I was a person, not a project. Ethan called 2 days later. Our first date was a walk along the harbor and takeout on a park bench. Simple, honest, and perfect. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't come from some long line of successful men or have a luxury apartment with a view of the skyline. He had worked his way up from nothing. Born in a tiny town in upstate South Carolina, raised by a single mom, graduated with a degree in civil engineering, and landed a job in Charleston through sheer determination and grit. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just trying to build something real. And with him, I didn't have to pretend. I could wear whatever I wanted, laugh too loudly, say the wrong thing, and he never made me feel small for it. He never made me feel like I had to be better or more. He just liked me. For me. We dated for a year before he proposed, nervously, sweetly on the same park bench where we'd shared that first takeout dinner. There was no grand gesture, no staged photos, just Ethan holding a ring in one hand and mine in the other, asking if I'd build a life with him. I said yes without hesitation. We married the following spring in a small ceremony by the water. It wasn't perfect. The flowers were late, my veil got caught on a bush, and my mom cried through the whole thing, but it was ours. Honest, simple, full of love. I moved into the little 2-bedroom house Ethan had bought just a few months before we met. It wasn't fancy, but it had a lemon tree in the backyard and a porch that caught the best afternoon light. And every morning, he'd kiss my temple and whisper, "You make this place home." With Ethan, I wasn't trying to be perfect. I didn't have to earn his affection. I could breathe. For the first time in my life, I felt safe, and I thought, maybe this is what real love is supposed to be. It started like any other evening when Ethan was out of town. I poured myself a glass of wine, lit a candle on the counter just to make the house feel less empty, and ran a hot bath with lavender oil. He had texted earlier, saying his meetings in Raleigh had run late and he'd be home Sunday evening. That gave me 2 more days of quiet, of solitude, or so I thought. I went into the kitchen to grab the Bluetooth speaker I kept in the drawer near the stove, just something to play music while I soaked. But when I opened the lower cabinet, I noticed something wedged between the side panel and the wall. A small rectangle, black, unfamiliar, a phone. I frowned, reaching in to pull it out. It was dusty, like it had been there a while, but not forgotten, not abandoned. The moment it was in my hand, it lit up. A call was coming through. Not just a call, a video call. The name on the screen read Natalie, followed by a heart emoji. My stomach dropped. I didn't think. I just answered. A girl's face filled the screen. Maybe 18, maybe a little older. Blonde, big blue eyes, soft, delicate features. Her expression changed the second she saw me. "Oh," she said, blinking rapidly. Did I call the wrong number?" I tried to keep my voice even. "Who are you looking for?" She hesitated. Ethan. "Sorry, are you?" "I'm his wife." Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment I thought she might cry. "Oh, I didn't know. I thought maybe this was still his. Sorry, I have to go." And just like that, the call ended. I stood there, frozen, staring at the black screen in my palm, the edges of my mind unraveling like thread. My hands were trembling. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I looked at the phone again. Old model, different brand from the one Ethan used daily. It had no case, no lock screen, just that name, that girl, Natalie. Everything after that moved in slow motion. I set the phone down on the counter like it might burn me. My bathwater grew cold in the tub. The candle melted into a pool of wax. I sat at the kitchen table for what felt like hours, trying to piece together a version of reality that made sense. He was cheating. He had to be. What else could this be? A hidden phone? A teenage girl? Her calling with a heart emoji next to his name? The late nights, the trips, the unexplained absences. How could I have been so blind? Sleep didn't come. I laid in our bed, eyes open, replaying every conversation, every touch, every time I told myself I was safe. I kept picturing her face. Young, soft, fragile, like someone who had never been lied to before. By the time morning came, my throat was raw from holding in tears, and I had made a dozen plans. Confront him, leave him, scream, demand answers. But none of them prepared me for what actually happened. Because Ethan came home early. I was still in my robe, sitting on the couch with the phone in my lap when the door opened. He stepped inside, suitcase in hand, looking tired, but not surprised to see me. His eyes went immediately to the object on my lap. "So," he said softly, closing the door behind him, "you found it." There was no panic in his voice, no scramble to explain, just a calm resignation that chilled me more than any lie could have. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer right away, just walked over slowly, sat in the armchair across from me, and looked at me like someone preparing for surgery without anesthesia. "I was going to tell you eventually," he said. "I just didn't know how." The silence that followed was louder than any shouting match. And in that silence, something inside me cracked again. Not like before when I broke free. This time it was fear. Real, heavy fear that the life I had built, the safety I thought I had found, was about to come undone all over again. "I need you to listen," Ethan said gently, his hands resting on his knees like he was anchoring himself to the ground. "This isn't what you think." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat was tight, my fingers clenched around the phone. He looked exhausted, not just tired, but weighed down like he'd been carrying something for a long time and had finally run out of places to hide it. He took a deep breath. "You know I have 2 best friends, Ben and Marcus. But there was a 4th. His name was Max." I blinked. The name didn't register at first. Then I remembered. Ethan had mentioned a childhood friend who died in a car crash years before we met. I had never asked much. He had seemed so pained, and I hadn't wanted to pry. Ethan leaned back slightly, staring at the wall behind me as if watching a reel of old memories. Max was the best of us. Smart, funny, steady. He married young, his high school sweetheart, Lena. They were the kind of couple that made you believe in fate. They had 3 kids. Natalie was their first, then twin boys. The name hit me like a stone. Natalie. I sat up straighter, the pieces slowly clicking into place, but I still couldn't speak. 10 years ago, Ethan continued, his voice tight, we surprised them with a trip for their anniversary. A real vacation. Just the 2 of them. We arranged childcare, bought the tickets, handled everything. They never got to come back. He paused, swallowing hard. The accident happened in the mountains. A tour bus driver had a heart attack behind the wheel. No survivors. For a moment, the room felt completely still. I imagined Natalie's small face on the screen, frozen in surprise. A child who had grown up without parents. My heart ached in ways I didn't know it could. After that, Ethan said, his voice softer now, it was chaos. Max's mom, Natalie's grandma, tried to hold things together, but a few years ago she had a stroke. She lost guardianship. The state was ready to step in. The kids were going to be placed into the system. I closed my eyes, already knowing what he would say next. We couldn't let that happen. Marcus and Ben have families of their own. I was single. I had money. I filed the paperwork and became their legal guardian. He looked directly at me then, eyes glassy. They live in their own home with a part-time caretaker. I cover everything. I see them every week. I'm not hiding them, Hannah. I just didn't know how to explain it without making it seem like something it's not. Then what is it? I finally asked, my voice breaking. Why the hidden phone? Why keep this from me? Because I was afraid, he said simply. Afraid you'd think I was lying. That you'd see it as a betrayal. That you'd feel like you didn't really know me. And honestly, maybe you didn't. I tried to protect you from it all. From the weight of it. From the complexity. I didn't want to bring that grief, that history into what we were building. I just wanted peace. For both of us. I stared at him. My chest felt full of rocks. But beneath the confusion, the anger, there was something else, something deeper. A flicker of awe, of guilt, of shame for assuming the worst. She called, I whispered. Natalie. That's how I found the phone. She looked so young. She was trying to warn me about a traffic jam, he said with a small, pained laugh. She knew I was driving to see them. She didn't mean for any of this. We sat in silence for a long time. I kept thinking of him. All those weekends, I thought he was working late, driving across state lines to check in on 3 kids who weren't his by blood, but were his by love, by loyalty, by promise. You could have told me, I said, not accusing, just sad. I know, he said. I was wrong, and I hate that I made you doubt me. But I swear to you, Hannah, I never betrayed you. I never would. And I believed him. Not because of what he said, but because of the look in his eyes, the guilt, the exhaustion, the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. For a long time after Ethan finished speaking, I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because my heart was trying to catch up with the truth. I'd spent an entire night believing the man I loved had betrayed me. I had stared at that hidden phone with shaking hands, imagining all the worst-case scenarios, letting every dark possibility bloom in my chest. And now here he was, raw, broken, honest, telling me a truth so far from what I feared, yet somehow even heavier. I felt everything all at once. Betrayal, yes, but not for the reasons I'd expected. I felt hurt that he hadn't trusted me with this part of his life. I felt guilty for having assumed the worst. I felt amazed, stunned, really, by the weight of what he'd carried alone. And beneath all of that, I felt something deeper. I felt proud of him. Ethan wasn't perfect. He never pretended to be. But what he had done, quietly without recognition, without asking for praise, was the kind of love I had only ever read about in novels. The kind that sacrificed, the kind that showed up, the kind that didn't need to be seen to be real. "I wish you'd told me," I said again, softer this time. "I know," he whispered. "I wanted to protect what we had. I didn't want you to feel like there was a part of me you couldn't reach." "But there was," I said, "and now it's here. All of it, and I have to decide what to do with it." He nodded, not pushing, not pleading, just waiting. And something about that, his stillness, his patience, made me trust him even more. I looked down at the phone still resting in my palm. Natalie's name on the screen felt different now. Not like a threat, not like a betrayal, but like an open door. "I want to meet them," I said finally. Ethan blinked, his shoulders tensing slightly. You do." I nodded. "If I'm going to be your partner, really be your partner, I can't just be part of the easy parts. I want to know the people you love, the people who shaped you, and if they're family to you, they're family to me too." His eyes filled with something between gratitude and disbelief. He reached across the space between us, took my hand gently, and kissed the inside of my wrist. "They'll love you," he said. "I hope so," I whispered. "But even if they don't, I think I already love them a little, just for being part of you." We spent the rest of the morning talking about the kids, about their personalities, about how Natalie had become almost like a little adult far too soon. Ethan told me about the twins, about their constant energy, their inside jokes, the way they still drew pictures of their parents when they missed them too much to say it out loud. We didn't make any grand decisions that day. No declarations or dramatic gestures, just small, intentional steps toward something bigger. A week later, they came to visit. Natalie was quieter in person than I expected, more guarded, but kind, thoughtful. Her eyes searched mine when we met, like she was trying to figure out who I really was. I didn't blame her, but she smiled eventually. And when I handed her a tube of lip gloss and said I needed her help picking out shoes for a party, she laughed. And something shifted. The boys were wild and sweet, full of questions, full of noise, full of life. And I loved them instantly. That summer, we had them over every weekend. We cooked together, played board games, walked by the harbor. They brought chaos into our neat little life, and I welcomed it. For the first time, our house felt full in a way I hadn't even realized it was lacking. The kind of full that comes with noise and mess and sticky fingers and someone yelling, "I called dibs on the last brownie," from the living room. I looked at Ethan one night while we sat on the porch, listening to the boys wrestle over a video game, and Natalie hummed to herself as she braided her hair. He was watching them with this quiet contentment on his face, and when he turned to me, I saw it reflected in his eyes. "I didn't think I could have all this," he said softly. "Not after everything." "Well," I smiled, leaning into him, "you don't have to do it alone anymore."